Lesson 7. Let's read our theme verse. Colossians 1:13. This is from the Message. God rescued us from dead-end alleys and dark dungeons. He sets us up in the kingdom of the Son he loves so much. So do you see a contrast there between all the other verses? All the other versions have talked about the kingdom of darkness. And then the contrast is the kingdom of light. This is saying the contrast was dead-end alleys and dark dungeons. How do you find yourself in a dead-end alley? Bad choices, okay. And if you're in a dead-end alley, is it a problem always, or is it just more of an inconvenience?
Yeah.
When is being in a dead-end alley a problem?
If someone's chasing you.
If someone's chasing you,
At night.
if you're being pursued.
Go to New York City and Chicago.
So if the situation is more urgent, you being in a dead-end alley is a bigger deal than if you've got plenty of time and you just took a wrong turn somewhere. Not, it's not comfortable even when you just take the wrong turn, but it's way different when there's more pressure at stake, when there's more things that could be happening or could be going on, and you find yourself in a dead-end alley. If I were rescued from a dead-end alley, what just happened to me? I didn't say you just found your way out of the dead-end alley. It said you were rescued from the dead-end alley. So this is more the pursuit side. Go ahead. You were saved from danger. How did you get saved? How? Somebody else stepped into the situation and ultimately got you out of that alley, right? Maybe they escorted you out. Maybe they pointed you in the right direction, but they helped you get out of that dead-end alley. And it didn't even say that it walked you back out through the entrance to the dead-end alley. It just said they rescued you from it. So remember, some of these versions say you were translated from the kingdom of darkness into the kingdom of light. So maybe the rescue is, the guy shows up with a helicopter and just picks you up out of there and drops you off where you need to be. That's cool. That's exactly what happened to us. What causes someone to end up in a dark dungeon? Bad choices. Okay.
Some are actually born in it.
Sometimes you're born in it. Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
In dark dungeons. So that's all you've known. You're not going to resist it because you don't know anything else. That's good. That's a different perspective on this. Is the person that finds themselves in the dark dungeon free? Regardless of how you got there. Regardless of if you were born there, if you got placed there, if somebody threw you in there, if you just fell in, whatever the case, if you find yourself in a dark dungeon, you are obviously not free. You are under somebody else's control. You are under somebody else's authority. Your life is not your own. You don't get a lot of choices in that matter. What is normally required to get somebody out of a dark dungeon? A penalty has to be paid. Okay. In the legal, in the societal issue. Okay. More practically, a good judge. Okay. More practically, what's required to get somebody out of a dark dungeon? Rescue. And what is this rescuer going to have? Authority. A weapon. Okay.
Money.
Or money to cause the person to be released from the dark dungeon. But what do they actually need to get them out of the dark dungeon? What?
Well, I said it repeats, but I'm not sure that's the right word.
Okay.
My mind immediately went to our reporter that's in jail in Russia.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. What defines a dungeon? What constitutes a dungeon? Dark. Okay, we've got the dark from the locks. Okay, now we're getting somewhere.
Fortified.
It's fortified. So at the very least, however you get to the point of somebody releasing you, they're going to have a key that opens a door.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Is there any other way to get out of a dark dungeon? Well, but even the angels have to deal with the locks. Unless they just pull you through the bars or something, they still have to, one way or another, open the locks. Does everyone see that? So if Jesus delivered us from a dark dungeon, what does that mean? He opened the lock. He opened what was creating the barrier, what was creating the separation. He opened that. He caused that to not be a bondage anymore. He released that. He opened it. Both of these locations and how someone's in up there are in contrast to the kingdom of his dear son. Should we ever again experience a dead end alley or a dark dungeon? If we're really living in the kingdom, should we ever again experience a dead end alley? No. Why not? What kingdom principle overrides the possibility of a dead end alley? What?
It's with the dungeon, because we have the key. You just
Okay,
gotta keep that.
okay. Well, that, yes, on the dungeon side. How about the dead end alley? The dead end alley. What kingdom idea says, as a kingdom citizen, you should never find yourself in a dead end alley?
Well, yesterday, like, I shared that, and I don't know the first word offhand, he says that he's giving you authority to trample on.
He's giving you authority, okay? I came that you might have life and have it to the full. I mean, there are a bunch of concepts that indicate to us, if I'm really doing what I need to do inside the kingdom, it may look like a dead end alley, but I'm not stuck there. That can be changed. I don't have to be rescued again from that dead end alley. All I need to do is figure out how to change the alley or not go there in the first place. It's another option. Okay, dark dungeon. In the kingdom, once you've been set free of that dark dungeon, if you find yourself back there, what happened? You chose to go. You made a bad decision. You didn't change something about your life or your thoughts or your actions. There was something that was still lacking if you find yourself back there again. Let's read a verse and then we'll talk about what we're going to announce what we're going to talk about today. Matthew 16:19. I will give you the keys, authority of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind, forbid, declare to be improper and unlawful on earth will have already been bound in heaven. And whatever you loose, permit, declare lawful on earth will have already been loosed in heaven. Today, we're going to talk about keys of the kingdom. Keys of the kingdom. So the verse I just read, let's go back and read the context for that verse, and we'll get some insight into what he's actually talking about here. Matthew 16, verses 13 through 20. Matthew 16, 13 through 20. When Jesus came to Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples this question: what are the people saying about me, the Son of Man? Who do they believe I am? They answered, some are convinced you are John the Baptizer. Others say you are Elijah reincarnated, or Jeremiah, or one of the prophets. But you, who do you say that I am? Jesus asked. Simon Peter spoke up and said, you are the anointed one, the Son of the living God. Jesus replied, you are favored and privileged, Simon. Simeon, that's weird. Simeon, okay. I had never noticed that before. Son of Jonah, for you did not discover this on your own, but my Father in heaven has supernaturally revealed it to you. I give you the name Peter, a stone, and this rock will be the bedrock foundation upon which I build my church, my legislative assembly, and the power of death will not be able to overcome it. I will give you the keys of heaven's kingdom realm to forbid on earth that which is forbidden in heaven, and to release on earth that which is released in heaven. Then he gave his disciples strict orders to not tell anyone that he was the Messiah. I hope you realize that it's not enough to know what others say Jesus is. It really doesn't matter what other people say Jesus is. That does you no good. The only thing that does you any good is who do you say that he is? And it's even more than saying, who do you believe that he is? Who have you experienced him to be? Your relationship with him, your experience with him, what you know about him. not just as a person, not just as a historical figure. How well you relate to him are really the only thing that matters where you are concerned. Before we talk about the rock portion of this, I want to point out verse 18 again. So I'll put it on one slide here and we can read it carefully. I give you the name Peter, a stone, and this rock will be the bedrock foundation upon which I will build my church, my legislative assembly, and the power of death will not be able to overpower it. This is the first, this verse is the first mention of church in the Bible. So Jesus is instituting a new concept, and he calls it a church. Our concept of church is very different from what was intended here. The Greek word is ekklesia, E-C-C-L-E-S-I-A, or E-K-K-L-E-S-I-A, whichever way you want to say it. I've seen it spelled and say both ways. The Passion translation accurately renders this as legislative assembly. Only the ecclesia, the legislative assembly, can effectively use these kingdom keys. That's important. The church, even though it's translated as church, and that's the correct translation, or concept of church is wrong. The church, as we know it, as most people understand it, has not used keys and really aren't equipped to use keys. You have to get your mindset over to what did Jesus actually create? The ecclesia, the legislative assembly. That group can use keys. That group should be using keys. So the keys are worthless until we get our concept of church and what he intended with church correct.
Are you talking about the church universal is the legislative assembly?
Yes. When Jesus set up the concept, it was not a religious term at all. It was a governmental term. It was a ruling term. It was a speaking into society term, not a religious gathering, not a religious place. It was purely a civil type word, not a religious word. There were other words that he could have chosen if he was talking about a religious entity. And that's where we've missed it. When we define the church as a religious entity in any form or fashion, we miss out on the legislative part of what the church is supposed to be doing. So the keys are worthless to us. I'll explain that in just a second. There's a footnote after the legislative assembly in this Passion version that reads, this is not a religious term at all, but a political and a governmental term that is used many times in classical Greek for a group of people who have been summoned and gathered together to govern the affairs of a city. For Jesus to use this term means he's giving the keys of governmental authority in his kingdom to the church. I'll say that again. He's giving the keys of his governmental authority inside the kingdom to the church. That's far different than the church is the place where we gather to have our religious services. It's way different. I would encourage you to study out ecclesia, to figure out what that means, to get a good grasp on that.
You do know there is a place that's called ecclesia.
I've heard that, yeah. That doesn't mean that they're operating that way, but they're probably closer than most.
Well, I heard him speak. He came to our circle and he is involved in trying to help with legislative things. And his group.
Now, I'm not saying this has to be totally on a civil governmental basis. I'm saying the church should be legislating in the spiritual realm.
I know.
The church should be dictating what happens in the spiritual realm, rather than we just be doing our little thing and hoping that we don't get bothered too much and hoping that they continue to allow us to have our nice little services and our nice little gatherings and our nice and keep our tax exempt status. Oh God, don't let them touch that.
No.
Anyway, in our pursuit to make sure that they don't come touch us, we've missed the whole point of the church, which is to be the legislative branch of God's kingdom. And to that branch, to those that understand it that way, he is given keys to get this done. Those keys are worthless unless you're going to approach it. Okay, my job here is to legislate in the heavenlies. My job here is to govern, to rule this area that I am in, using civil government, using other things, but taking over all of the centers where power is derived, taking over all the places where society, where culture, where thoughts are governed.
Assembly.
Right. The seven mountains, if you want to call it that. We're supposed to be in charge of what happens on all seven mountains. And the church, by and large, has just picked the one mountain, the religion mountain, and we don't even control that one anymore. Okay, the thing about the rock being the bedrock foundation, the ecclesia needs some attention. What is this rock that becomes the bedrock of the ecclesia? The choices are either Peter himself or the revelation of Jesus being the Christ that Peter had.
Second.
It is the second one. That's the right answer. But some people get all messed up about, well, he's talking to Peter. So Peter gets his own degree of influence or something in some cultures and some societies and some religions.
In the Roman Catholic Church.
Right. And that's where they're getting this. That's where they're coming up with this. They're in the same text. There's a footnote after "and this rock," referring to Peter, that reads, in context, the rock is not Peter, but the revelation that he received from the Father that Jesus is the Christ. So Jesus is building his ecclesia on the revelation that Jesus was the Christ, that he was the anointed one, that he carries with him an anointing to do all these things that we're going to be legislating. Let's read this in one other version, and this point will come out a little more clear in that version. This is the Wuest translation. Moreover, as for myself, I'm also saying to you, you are a rock. So he's saying to Peter, you are a rock, Petros, and that is masculine gender, a detached but large fragment of rock. And upon this massive rock, Petra, which is feminine in gender, the feminine denominative pronoun cannot go back to a masculine Petros. A rocky peak, a massive rock, I will build my church. So if you knew Greek grammar, what that's saying is when he calls Peter a rock, it's masculine. And the rock of revelation that the church is going to be built on is feminine. So the second rock cannot refer back to the first rock. They've changed genders, and that doesn't work. That you can't do that. Doesn't make sense. They have an identity crisis with pronouns.
I'm having a brain about how can a rock be,
Do what?
how can a rock have gender?
In classical languages, every word had a gender assigned to it.
Oh, okay, kind of like Hebrew.
Right. And what he's saying here is you wouldn't, in the second sense, refer to a feminine thing and its antecedent to the pronoun, if you want to say it grammatically, be a masculine thing. That doesn't work. So it's impossible to really boil down that the rock that Jesus was talking about was Peter. It wasn't. It was this revelation that he received.
And is that why it was done? So we know if they weren't talking about rock, they were talking about the faith God gave.
That's why this guy translated it the way that he did.
Okay,
Does that make sense?
yes.
Okay. All right. So verses 17 through 19 from the Message. Jesus came back. God bless you, Simon, son of Jonah. You didn't get that answer out of books or from teachers. My Father in heaven, God himself, let you in on this secret of who I really am. And now I'm going to tell you who you really are. Isn't it great when God starts telling you who you really are? Isn't it? It's sometimes troublesome when he starts telling you who you are because, well, whoa, that's way different than what I had believed. That's way different than what I had learned or what I had assumed or what I had believed about myself. We need those encounters. We need him to do that more and more frequently. We need to be willing to dump all this other junk that we've established as who we are and let God really tell us who we are. But in this process, he says, okay, now I'm really going to tell you who you are, who you really are. You are Peter, a rock. This is the rock on which I will put together my church, my legislative assembly, a church so expansive with energy that not even the gates of hell will be able to keep it out. And that's not all. You will have complete and free access to God's kingdom, keys to open any and every door. No more barriers between heaven and earth and heaven. A yes on earth is a yes in heaven. A no on earth is a no in heaven. Are these keys significant? The fact that he gave us these keys, is that significant? In the hands of the legislative assembly. Not as just another, oh yeah, I know about that. In the religious context of church. But if you are doing this right, if you are governing, if you are ruling the heavenly realms, if you are ruling the centers of culture, if you are ruling the places where God has sent us, then it's very important that you have keys to access resources in the kingdom of heaven, to bring those to pass, to bring those to earth. I always like to say this when I talk about this, and it's always funny to me. Have you ever realized that gates don't move?
Gates.
Gates don't move. The gate rotates on the fence post, but the gate does not move. Once a gate is established, it's there. It's either opened or closed at that moment, but the gate itself does not move. I get this idea sometime when we're talking about, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against us. We're in this little God fort, and all our task is to survive the onslaught of the enemy. Like the gates are attacking us, and it's our task to make sure that we just don't get swallowed away and don't get overthrown and destroyed in the process of the battle. Gates don't move, people. So what does that mean? Who's the one on the offensive? We're supposed to be going to them. We're supposed to be taking the battle to them, not the other way around. And if the gates of hell will not be able to overcome us, that means we should be able to go right up into hell and take whatever we want to out of there. Now, there's probably not anything in hell that I want to get. God has better stuff. So why would he say, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against you? Is there anything that I want there? Is there anything that I need there? So yeah, I'm authorized to go to that extreme and get whatever I need. But is there anything there that I want? Perhaps gates of hell meant something else. Have you ever heard in the scripture about the city gates? What happens at the gates of a city?
Where judicial decisions.
That's where decisions are made. That's where business about the city is conducted. That's where the city is governed, if you will. So the gates of hell coming against our various forms of society or our various forms of culture, we have the authority to go right up to those gates where all these decisions are being made. And their power will not be able to stop us. Their power will not be able to hinder us. Their power will not be able to overcome us if we're doing our job right.
Just like our legislators, governors and presidencies and should not be able to overcome our
Right,
rule of the kingdom.
right. And bad people are going to do bad things. But the problem goes back a step where, how did all these crazy people get elected? Where were the rest of us that either weren't voting or not voting correctly, not voting according to the kingdom about some of this stuff? We've got all our thoughts messed up. We've got all of everything's messed up. And as a result of it being messed up, we're putting people in there that are messed up. Well, you put messed up people in a messed up system, what do you get? Messed up. I mean, it doesn't take a rocket science to figure that out.
Some of them, I think, gets persuaded.
Uh,
They're
not as strong as individuals. Okay.
Sent the right person, but when they got around all that wrong, evil thinking, they got sucked in.
Why did we allow the evil thinking, the evil culture to remain?
I don't know,
Either we have the authority to fix it or we don't.
because we're too busy.
Playing church.
That's I want you to say.
So if the idea is, okay, the gates of hell will not be able to prevail against me, and the decisions, the affairs, the government, the business of the city, the business of the culture is done at the gates, where should we be? We should be right there in the midst of the gates. We should be giving God's position and using our kingdom authority, using our keys at those gates to release what God wants to release over all those areas of culture, all those areas of society. Okay. Matthew 16:19 from some other versions. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. The things and whatever you don't allow, forbid, bind on earth, will be the things that God does not allow, forbidden, bound in heaven. Okay, stop right there. What is this key that he's given us? Whatever you say on earth, I'm going to enforce it in heaven. Whatever you say is good in heaven, I'm going to say is good in heaven. I'm good on earth, I'm going to say is good in heaven. Whatever you say is bad on earth, I'm going to say is bad in heaven. Whatever you say is bad on earth, I'm going to say is bad in heaven. Whatever you say is good in heaven, I'm going to say is good in heaven. Whatever you say is bad on earth, I'm going to say is bad in heaven. Whatever you say is good in heaven, I'm going to say is good in heaven. Whatever you say is bad on earth, I'm going to say is bad in heaven. Second part of that, and things, whatever you allow, permit, loose on the earth will be the things that God allows, permitted, loosed in the heavens. Whatever you imprison, God will imprison. Whatever you set free, God will set free. What you lock on earth will be locked in heaven. Now we're back to this key thing. Whatever you lock, whatever you stop, whatever you hinder on earth will also be locked in heaven. Whatever you unlock on earth will be unlocked in heaven. I'll give you the keys of the holy nation of heaven. Now, this one says holy nation rather than kingdom. The kingdom is a holy nation of heaven. Have you ever seen these people that get the key to the city? Now, surely you've seen those things.
Sure.
Does that key mean anything?
No.
It's a publicity ceremony.
Yeah, they're kind of-
We've actually been given that key that you can do something with, that you have power to do something with, and we don't use it. We don't think we're worthy of it. We don't think that we're capable. We don't understand what it is. We've been given the real authority to fix it, real authority to change things, and we're not doing what we need to be doing.
I think the church used to help with that.
Oh, it did.
I remember nothing open on Sunday.
Right,
It was when you worship.
right. Or Wednesday.
No divorces without.
Right,
Adultery or one of the.
right.
Reasons, but we just said the society and the church, but it's like being told, that's not.
Right.
If you love and be kind, then you can win these people to God.
And that's exactly my point, that the church is playing church and not
Yeah.
doing their legislative duties. We're not using our keys. We're not using what we've been given to handle these situations and these things.
People don't even know that it used to be like.
Right.
that in America.
Right. And the new group has been lied to about what the history was. It's our fault. We let it happen. We've been silent. We've been quiet. We haven't done what we needed to do to stop those things from happening. It's on us. And it's also going to be on us to get it fixed. And God's going to have to show up, but we're going to have to start doing what we need to be doing. He's going to have to work with us in partnership to get this thing fixed. I give you the keys to the holy nation of heaven. Whatever you do not allow on earth will not have been allowed in heaven. Whatever you allow on earth will have been allowed in heaven. Okay, this relates to a verse in Isaiah. Let's go read that verse. Isaiah 22:22. The Lord will put him in charge of the key that belongs to King David's family. No one will be able to unlock what he locks, and no one will be able to lock what he unlocks. You see how this is like access? This person is going to have the ability to control access to things, to God, to the kingdom of God. If they unlock the door, nobody can lock that door back. If they lock the door, nobody can unlock that door. Either you have access or you don't have access. And it comes down to what this person decided to do with the authority, with the key that they have. I will put the key to the house of David, and this is a comment in the EXV, a sign of authority indicating access to the king around his neck. If he opens the door, no one will be able to close it. If he closes the door, no one will be able to open it. So what's it saying? This person is going to have the ability to determine who and what have access to God, who or what have the access to get into the kingdom of God. And for whatever reason, if I don't want you doing this, I can shut it down. For whatever reason, if I want you doing this and want you doing it better, I can open that door, make it wider, make it easier for you to have access to God. I'll give him responsibility over all my people. Whatever he says will be done. None will be able to stop him. I'll give him the key of the Davidic heritage. He will have run of the place. Open any door and keep it open. Lock any door and keep it locked. Bless you. So in the natural, a key is a physical thing that goes into a lock and opens it, right? Notice how keys work in this verse. The top verse there. Whatever he says will be done, none will be able to stop him. How do keys work in the spiritual realm? Your mouth, your words, your voice. You're not taking a physical key and shoving it in a physical lock. What are you doing when you open a lock in the spiritual realm? You're opening your mouth. You're saying something. You're making a decree. You're making a declaration about this situation. Either, yes, I agree with this, or no, I do not agree with this. I've got my opinion from heaven, and I'm going to get into agreement with heaven. And then heaven is backing my decision as the focal point on the earth of whatever heaven wants to accomplish here. But it's all done with my voice. It's all done with my mouth. I've said before that a normal lock does not care at all who is trying to open it. So that door on that lock right there, if I had the key to that, I do not have the key to that, but if I had the key to that, does it matter who I am trying to open that door as long as I have the key? What are they looking for? What's the lock looking for? The right key. It makes no difference who's holding that key. In the spirit, your key is voice activated.
Amen to that.
So what does that do? That eliminates a lot of people from using a key that shouldn't be using that key. They won't say it. They don't know they're supposed to say it. They don't believe it when they say it. So it's a way of adding security to a fact that anybody with the right key can open the door. In the spirit realm, it's voice activated, and most people aren't even going to say it if they don't really understand what's going on here. Now, some people will try, and sometimes they will have some results, even if they do try and they're not in the right place, I guess, to attempt to open that lock. But we see biblical examples where both where that worked and where that didn't work. I mean, there were people that come to Jesus and say, didn't we cast out devils in your name? Didn't we do all this stuff in your name? Depart from me, you workers of iniquity. I never knew you. They had some success, regardless of their condition. So even though they weren't on the right team, they weren't doing the right thing, the law, the kingdom, they still opened their mouth, they still did what they did, and it still worked. But then we also see the 7 sons of Sceva. Paul, I know, Jesus, I know, who are you? And they abused them, basically, if you want to boil it down there. Because it was voice activated, it's going to limit some people from using that key. They don't know, they don't care, they're not that desirous, they're not that ambitious, they're not that brave, they're not that bold, whatever. It's a security measure that it's voice activated. And then the second part here, when people rightly have a key, and I said rightly have a key, meaning you are issued a key through legal, correct, proper means. What does that mean? We say it another way. If you have a legitimate key to a door, what can you rightly do? Open that door. Whoever gave you the key has determined that you are worthy enough, you are authorized to have whatever's on the other side of that door. Right? And if you don't have a key, for whatever reason, has the governing authority of that organization, of that house, of that building, have they determined that you are authorized to get to whatever's on the other side of that door? There's a reason it's locked. And it may not be to keep you from something, maybe to keep you safe, but you don't need to be on the other side of that door. You don't need to be accessing whatever is there if you don't have a key to open that door. We've been given the key. What does that mean? We are authorized to get to whatever's on the other side of that lock, on the other side of that door. We're authorized to get there. We're authorized to use it. We're authorized to claim it. We're authorized to distribute it. We have been given authorization to open that door and use, to whatever extent we would like to use, whatever's on the other side of the door. Keys denote spiritual authority. Keys denote spiritual authority. If I'm not authorized to be on the other side of the door, if I'm not authorized to use whatever's on the other side of that door, do I have authority to use whatever's on the other side of that door? But when I get the key, I have now authority to go through that door. Spiritual keys are authority. Keys are authority in the spiritual realm. So if you've got a key, that means you have some authority in that area. Are you using your authority? Or are you making somebody else find a different key to open this door to get to whatever's on the other side of it? Are you doing your job? Are you opening the door? Am I opening the door? Whatever you do and say makes the kingdom, more specifically, proximity to the king, either more or less accessible to those seeking to get closer to that king. Let's think about that. If I see somebody and they're struggling with something, and I have a key to that scenario, I have a key to that problem, I have a key to that issue, and I go open that lock for them, what did I just do? I made it easier for them to get to the king. I made it easier for them to get to the heaven's resources about this problem, about the situation. Likewise, if I see somebody that's being a knucklehead and they keep going back to something that they've been freed from, they've been delivered from, and I lock that door for them, what did I just do? I still made access to the king better, more consistent, because now they can't go over here and distract themselves. Either way, it's about access to the king. I can either make it bigger, I can make it narrower. By the way that I talk, by the way that I act, by what I do, I can either let people get to the king easier or make it harder for them to get to the king. Are we doing that? Have we viewed our keys? Have we viewed our authority that way? My job is to use my key to make it easier for you to get to the king. As I was digging through some stuff the other day, I was looking for my Home Depot card at work, at home. And somehow I got separated from my other credit cards, my other cards, but I needed my Home Depot card. Anyway, in the process of looking for it, I came across several old key rings with keys. In some cases, I knew what the key went to. In some cases, I didn't know what the key went to. Some of the ones that I knew that they went to, I don't even have that anymore. I mean, there was one of them that was the spare set of keys for a car that I sold, I don't know, 8 years ago or something. Is that key doing me any good? Okay, I knew what it was. I knew where the key went. I don't have that in my possession anymore. So does that key help me at all? What about all these keys that I have there that I can't even identify? I don't know what door they went to. Are those helping me? What defines whether a key is useful or not?
Know what it opens.
If you know what it opens, what?
Takes you where you need to go.
Takes you where you need to go. How about if I'm using it? I've got a handful of keys. I know what they went to, but it's not helping me because I'm not going through that door. I don't need to open that door anymore. I don't ever go there. Is that key helping me? So for a key to be useful, what do you have to do with it? Use it. Are the keys that we have been given useful to us or not? Are we using them? And what would you use them for? To give somebody else better access to the king. Better access to the kingdom. Jesus said that he would give us the keys to the kingdom. That's what he's promising in this verse that we've been reading here. Did he actually do it? Or did he lie about it? I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Did he do it or not? It's not a trick question. Y'all are hesitating. If he did it, are we acting like he did it? And how can you tell? Are you using the key? If we really believe that he did it, and we really start acting that way, what are we going to do as a consequence? We're going to start using the key. We're going to start allowing people to have better access to God through what we do, what we say, how we act, how we think. For the record, I must say that this verse in Isaiah 22:22 is about Eliakim, son of Hilkiah, who is going to be replacing Shebna, who was the steward, treasurer, or manager of the royal household at that time. This was not messianic, at least in the direct context. It became messianic because this guy ended up becoming a type of Jesus. But this verse itself was not even about the Messiah. And yet, God says, I'm still going to give him, this guy, this Bob guy, this normal, everyday person guy, not even the Messiah, I'm going to give him the authority to open and close. How much more authority do we have? You go over to Revelation chapter 3, verses 7 and 8, and you kind of see this theme picked back up. Write down my words and send them to the messenger of the church in Philadelphia. These are the words of the Holy One, the true one, and the one who possesses the key of David, which opens the possibilities so that no one can shut them. Now think about that. This key opens possibilities so that no one can shut them. The one who closes all options so that no one can open. I know your deeds. See, I've placed before you an open door, which no one can shut. I have done this because you have limited strength, yet you obeyed my word and have not denied my name. So now this thing has gone full circle, and this thing that was spoken of to this guy, Elkia, is now messianic. And now Jesus, the one true one, is holding the keys, and he's doing the same thing. Whatever door I open is going to remain open. Whatever door I close is going to remain closed. He's given us that same authority. EXB says it this way. This is what the one who is holy and true, who holds the key of David. Commentary again in this read. The resurrected Jesus holding the key of David signifies access to the king. Says, when he opens a door, no one can close it. When he closes it, no one can open it. Jesus controls access to God. Jesus controls access to God. He told us that. He said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except by me.
Yeah.
So does he control access to the Father?
Yeah.
And yet he's given us that key. You as my representatives, you as my appointed heirs, you as my family, you as my brothers and sisters, I'm now giving you the key that I own, which is access to the Father. Are you using that key? Well, how do I give access to the Father? How do I do that? How do I give somebody else easier access to the Father? Hang on, we're getting there. Matthew 12:28-29. But if it's by God's power that I'm sending the evil spirits packing, then God's kingdom is here for sure. How in the world do you think it's possible in broad daylight to enter the house of an awake, able-bodied man and walk off with his possessions unless you tie him up first? Tie him up, though, and you can clean him out. What possessions are we trying to take here? Doesn't hell have some stuff under their control that we probably need to get our hands on? Doesn't it have some people under their control that we need to get our hands on? Doesn't it have some resources under its control that we need to get our hands on? The 7 mountains. So what do we do? How are we supposed to get control of them? Bind that guy. Bind the one holding it. Bind the one controlling it. Limit his ability. We've been given the key to do that. Yeah.
Biggest problem that we have struggled with being the universal church is that we don't always agree on things.
True.
I mean, there's hot buttons that I won't go into, but there's hot buttons. There's certain people that are for it and certain people that are against it. And because of that, it creates a dilemma where those keys can never be activated or used.
True.
We don't agree.
Right. True. And I don't know how we deal with that.
Yeah.
Last week, we talked about being ambassadors of the kingdom and how one of the functions of the ambassador is once you become an ambassador, you no longer have an opinion of your own. The only opinion that you are supposed to articulate is the opinion of the one that you're representing.
You have to be able to teach.
Correct.
And that's the truth. That's what we're supposed to do. Not just.
And maybe,
Come and say, "You're wrong."
and I'm not going to say stay away from stuff that we know is problematic, but if you boil it down, even Christians that are most divisive, the churches that are most, I guess, in conflict with one another, if you want to say it that way, they agree on 95% of everything. Why are we focusing on this 10% that's causing so many issues?
Because it's getting-
Oh, absolutely. And that's just, we talked about that last week too, that would be one of his strategies is to get in there and mess that up.
Yeah.
To prevent us from moving forward, to prevent ultimately us from using the keys effectively. But we say the whole church, the capital C church, it only takes 2 or 3.
Yes.
He didn't say, okay, once I get my whole body in agreement, then this will happen. No, two or three of you agree on anything as touching it, and we're going to read that verse in just a minute. Touching anything that they shall ask, it shall be done for them by my Father which is in heaven. Our problem is we're not willing to either get in agreement or stay in agreement long enough to see it work. So we're changing our mind all the time. I've mentioned this numerous times as a prayer partner. I mean, you're up there and you pray for somebody and you see the same person come back up the next week for the same thing. Really? I thought we prayed for this last week. I thought we prayed about this. Are you saying that that didn't work? So you pulled yourself out of agreement? Now you're going to do something else? And I'm not going to get on that soapbox today, but
I think a lot of people don't think they deserve whatever it was that they were asking God for, or you were praying for them about. They feel unworthy.
or because it hasn't happened yet, they don't believe that they have already received it.
Oh, okay, that could be.
They're judging whether or not I've got it by whether or not I've got it. And you have it before you have it. And both of those things sound contradictory, but if you know what I'm saying, that it's true. You have it in the spiritual realm before you ever have it in the physical realm.
That's where our mouth can come in.
Your mouth. And that's where patience comes in. That's where long suffering, that's where perseverance, that's where all those other things come in. But you've got to live this out by faith. If you already had the answer, there's no faith required. And it is impossible to please God without faith. So he's going to set up the situation so that at some point and for some period of time, faith is required. And if you insist upon having the physical manifestation of that thing before the period comes up and then you don't get to define the period, you pull yourself out of agreement, then you go to the next person. Well, maybe this guy will be more anointed than the last one. We'll get some results here. Well, you're out of agreement now, and then you go back into agreement, and then it won't be next week until you're going to go out of agreement with him. This is a vicious cycle. Will our keys operate under that condition? It's not going to work. But still, I'm thrilled to realize that it only takes 2 or 3 of us to get together to start seeing some change, to start seeing something happens once we're willing to go there. The Amplified. I think it's a different verse. Matthew 18 through 20. I assure you and most solemnly say to you, whatever you bind, forbid, declare to be improper and unlawful on earth, shall have already been bound in heaven, and whatever you loose, permit, declare lawful on earth, shall have already been loosed in heaven. Again, I say to you, that if 2 believers on earth agree, that is, are of one mind in harmony about anything that they ask within the will of God, it will be done for them by my Father in heaven. For where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, meeting together as my followers, I am there among them. We know that verse, but do we really believe that verse? Or do we view that as like optional? That doesn't really affect my day-to-day Christianity, so I'm just not going to worry about that. Yeah, it's in the Bible, it's true. I'm just not going to go there because it doesn't really impact my day. Does it really impact your day-to-day? If we're doing this right, it should. Just for kicks, when you get some time today, read verses 15 through 17 of that chapter to see the specific application for this. It's really interesting how it applies otherwise. It applies, you're going to do it right now. Okay, I'll give you a few minutes to look at it and we'll talk through this. Wasn't my intention, but it is. If you find it, go ahead and read it out loud.
Yes. Says moreover, if your brother shall trespass against you, you go tell him it's this law between you and him alone. If he shall hear you, you have gained your brother. But if he will not hear you, then you take would be 1 or 2 more. But in the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, every word may be established. And if he shall neglect to hear them, tell it to the church. But if he neglect to hear the church, let him be unto you as a heathen man and a publican.
Now, I have never seen in all my
Scripture.
verses 15 and 17, Matthew 18, 15 through 17. It's the 3 verses right in front of what we just read.
I read that.
I have never seen that done.
Me neither.
I've never even really heard of that being done.
I've heard of it, but I've never seen it.
And yet that is the context for this passage. Whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven. Whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. Any two of you agree on earth is touching anything, it shall be done. And I'm not saying it's wrong to use it out of that context, use it in a different application. I'm not saying that at all. But he placed so much trust in the church's ability to be his legislative assembly that we have the right to speak over people that are being knuckleheads repeatedly. Okay, look, we're going to stop this thing. We're going to evoke, revoke, excommunicate. I don't know what the term is even for this happening. I've never seen it done.
I believe the Church of Christ practiced that. I had a friend that went there years ago, and she said they did.
But if it matters about somebody that's already in the family, well, technically in the family, I don't even know if you're really in the family, you can fall into. That's why I didn't want to go there, because it opens up all sorts of questions and things. But if we can be trusted to represent heaven's opinion about whether or not somebody is actually in the kingdom or remains in the kingdom, how much more should we value God's opinion and God's belief and God's confidence in us to dictate the affairs of the enemy on this earth? Moving right along.
That is the prototype of dealing with conflict in the church. Like you said, most churches don't even go there because they want to love him
Right,
or her.
right.
But
Or tolerate.
yeah, but the true measure of love would be to bring it, to do it that way. And then that way, the conflict is done correctly according to scripture.
Right.
And then, God can say, well, you guys didn't handle it right.
Now, I don't know that I ever want to be in one of those services, because that would just be, really awkward to say bluntly. But I don't see how, if we start doing this right, I don't see how we're going to be able to avoid it. Those things are coming. Those things are going to be part of what we do. And how we handle that is going to determine how successful we are at the rest of it. Will our binding and loosing, will our decreeing, will our agreeing, will all that stuff work properly for us in the context of heaven and hell when we hadn't got this part of it figured out yet?
If we don't tell people the truth, we don't really know. If they're living in the sin and we don't want to have to mess with it, we want to just show them love, and we never tell them the truth, then we're not really helping. Isn't that what part of that's about?
Yeah. And making sure that their life is really changed, that they're doing what needs to be done, that they can't continue in their old ways. Now, I don't want to be the one that has to say that.
Well, nobody wants to be that.
But it's in here. It's in the book. Now, there's some debate about whether Matthew 16, where we started, when Jesus was talking to Peter, about whether or not he gave the keys to Peter or whether he gave them to the whole group. In this case, he gave them to everybody that was listening. So I don't think there's any debate anymore about who got the keys. It's all of us. It's all of us that are in the kingdom. It's all of us that are his representatives on the earth. Our toolbox contains keys.
It's the faith that Peter spoke.
Right.
Easier than the sign.
But if you look back in the Greek part of it, it says, I will give you the keys of the kingdom. It's a personal program, not the group collective pronoun. So they would say, well, he gave it to Peter as an individual, not to the whole group. This to me is to the whole group. And it's saying the same thing. So whether or not that one was to him or to the whole group, this is to the whole group. We're in on the thing by extension. Luke 11:52. So religious scholars, judgment will come on you. You're supposed to be teachers, unlocking the door of knowledge and guiding people through it. But the fact is, you've never even passed through the doorway yourselves. You've taken the key, left the door locked tight, and stood in the way of everyone who sought entry. Now think about that. In the context of the key being access to God, being the ability to make it easier or make it harder for somebody to get to God. What had these religious leaders done? They had taken the key of knowledge and locked the door tight so that nobody else could follow through that door.
That's why they didn't like- that's him as the
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's why Jesus had constant issues with them, constant confrontations from them. But what had they done to do that? At least part of what they had done is they had made it harder for people to get through that door. They had used the key incorrectly to lock a door that they should have opened. They made access to God more difficult. They made access to God more impossible, more demanding. And then to top it all off, they hadn't even walked through the door themselves. So it wasn't like they walked through it, got to the other side and locked it back. No, they just said, no, we're not going there. Click. I'm going to lock it. I'm going to use my authority. I'm going to use my place to close this door so that not only I can't go in there, but nobody else can either.
That's religion.
That's religion.
Yeah.
And Jesus isn't very happy about it. They're using the key incorrectly. They're using the key to make it harder, to make it more difficult, rather than to make it more accessible. How did Jesus use the key? Let's give a couple of examples of him actually using this key to make it easier, and then we'll talk. Luke 13, 10 through 17. Now he was teaching in one of the synagogues on the Sabbath, and a woman was there who had been disabled by a spirit for 18 years. She was bent over and could not straighten herself up completely. When Jesus saw her, he called her to him and said, "Woman, you are freed from your infirmity." Then he placed his hands on her, and immediately she straightened up and praised God. But the president of the synagogue, indignant because Jesus had healed on the Sabbath, said to the crowd, "There are 6 days on which work should be done. So come and be healed on one of those days and not on the Sabbath day." Then the Lord answered him, "You hypocrites, does not each of you on the Sabbath untie his ox or his donkey from its stall and lead it to water? Then shouldn't this woman, a daughter of Abraham, whom Satan bound for 18 young years, be released from this imprisonment on the Sabbath day?" When he said this, all his adversaries were humiliated, but the entire crowd was rejoicing at all the wonderful things he was doing.
Yeah.
How did Jesus use a key to open access to God for this lady? What was in her way? What was the thing that was binding her? What was the thing that was causing her trouble? What? This spirit, this infirm, this diseased spirit that was on her. How did Jesus use a key? Woman, you are loosed.
No, he spoke it.
He spoke, and he loosed something off of her. Heaven backed the loosing. And then he ends up saying, "You are released." Shouldn't this daughter of Abraham be released? Shouldn't she be free? Shouldn't she be loosed from this thing? Yes, it was an Abrahamic covenant reference. I'm not getting into all that. All I'm saying is, as so often in the ministry of Jesus, he uses a key to give somebody access to God. He opens a door that was in the way. He opens something up to them, opens up something for them that allows them freer, clearer, more direct access to God or to the kingdom of God. All he had to do is unlock this spirit that was on her. So he shoves the key in the lock. Of course, he's using his mouth, but in the visual sense, shoves the key in the lock, unlocks that gate, unlocks that door, which frees her to go into the next room without the bondage of that spirit. Did he open up access to the Father? By using a key. We're supposed to do the same thing. How are we supposed to bind and loose? How are we supposed to use our keys? What kind of access can you give to somebody else by getting them free of whatever's holding them back? By casting that out, by removing that, by getting that off of their shoulders, you've just cleared the path for them to get to God by using your key, by using binding and loosing, by getting heaven to back you up because you have already agreed with what they said, with what the position that they already had about this issue. Once that occurs, open the key and she's free. Now she has free access to God. For me, this is kind of different because I hadn't really thought about using keys that way. What are you doing when you bind? What are you doing when you loose? You're giving yourself or somebody else access to God. You can't make them go. You can't make them choose it, but you can give them the opportunity to go there freely. People that are unsaved, have you ever prayed for them? Okay, God, give them a moment of clarity where the spirits that are influencing them are silent for a moment. That they can think on their own, that they're not being influenced, that they're not being pushed, that they're not being kicked, driven in one direction or another. I just speak peace. I just speak release. I just speak wholeness and soundness, that they will have this moment where they get to choose on their own. What am I doing in that case? I'm using my key to give them access to God. They still have to choose to go. I can't make them go. But I'm giving them a free choice for a moment of time, for a period of time, so that they're not being influenced as they make that choice. Does that kind of change the way you're supposed to use your keys? Binding and loosing. I give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. In a practical sense, does that, okay, this is how this works. This is how this is supposed to operate. I'm supposed to use my authority to make the road for you to get to God easier, clearer, straighter. See another one. Mark 7:34-37. Once more, Jesus left the neighborhood of Tyre and passed through Sidon towards the Lake of Galilee and crossed the 10 towns territory. They brought to him a man who was deaf and unable to speak intelligibly, and they implored him to put his hand upon him. Jesus took him away from the crowd by himself. He put his fingers in the man's ears and touched his tongue with his own saliva. Then looking up to heaven, he gave a deep sigh and said to him in Aramaic, "Open." Now think about that. Open. What's he speaking to? The door that was keeping him bound. The thing that was keeping him from walking in the fullness of what God wanted to do for him. Open. And his ears were opened, and immediately whatever had tied his tongue came loose. And he spoke quite plainly. Jesus gave instructions they should not tell no one about this happening, but the more he told them, the more they broadcast the news. People were absolutely amazed and kept saying how wonderful he has done everything. He makes the deaf to hear and the dumb to speak. His tongue was loosed. How did Jesus do that? He took a key and he opened a door. He used his spiritual authority to get the demonic thing, to get the illness, to get the disease, to get the malformation in his mouth, whatever it was, however you want to identify it, however you want to classify it. He took that monstrosity and he opened that door. Now, does this guy have access to a fuller life in God and in the kingdom? I picked these two verses because they had the word loose or loose wording in them. I would say that most of what Jesus did for people was him turning a kingdom key to give them better access to the Father and or the kingdom, whether or not those words loose or something like that were present. I'm not going to say everything he did. I haven't studied it out. But if you think about it, most of the things that he did was probably him turning the key. Him getting something off of their back, getting something out of their life, getting something out of their way so that they have better access to God.
Question. You think Jesus knew when he said, "Now don't tell anybody"? That just make him tell me?
I don't know. It would have been futility, I think, for him to say it if he didn't think that it might have mattered.
That's what I mean.
Remember, he wasn't operating in his omniscience. So at this point, he might not have actually known. Maybe he thought it was actually going to help. I don't know.
You know, if you've ever told somebody a secret,
Right.
you've heard about somebody
Right.
before long, all these people know whatever what you said. Maybe it's just part of human nature, and he had experienced it being.
Were you going to say something, Eunice? Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, let's read a couple more passages and then we'll be done today. This is Luke 4:16-21. Okay, now my point is Jesus used this almost everywhere he went. He used this idea of, I'm going to open a lock. I'm going to use a key and I'm going to get something off of you, get something out of your way so that you have better access to God. Jesus traveled to Nazareth where he had grown up. On the Sabbath day, he went to the synagogue as he always did and stood up to read. The book of the scroll of Isaiah the prophet was given to him. He opened, unrolled the book, the scroll, and found the place where this is written. The Lord has put his spirit in me. The spirit of the Lord is on me, because he has anointed me to tell, proclaim, preach the good news, gospel to the poor. He has sent me to tell the captives that they are free, proclaim liberty, release for the captives, prisoners. Let's stop right there. What was one of the things that Jesus was anointed to do? Tell the captives that they are free. Proclaim liberty, release for the captives or the prisoners. Now, did he do that physically? Did he release anybody from jail? He did not. And that's one of the reasons that John the Baptist got kind of upset with him. Are you really the guy? Because you're supposed to bring release to the captain, and here I am in jail. Even though we had this encounter when I baptized you, and I was very certain then, are you really the guy? Because here I am still in jail. He was disappointed. He got focusing on the wrong thing. Did Jesus physically set captives free during his earthly ministry? He did not. Did he spiritually set people free? All the time. Did they assume that this meant physical? I'm sure they did. So they missed the whole point of what he was doing. But how many people did he set free spiritually who were captives? And how did he set them free? By proclaiming, I'm here to release you. Here's the key. Let's read on. And to tell the blind that they can see again. God sent me to free those who have been treated unfairly, the oppressed. God sent him to free those who have been oppressed. How's he going to do that? How did he do that? Here's a key. Here's a key to that situation. Here's a key to that spirit. Here's a key to that history. Here's a key to that emotional experience. Here's a key to that wound. Here's a key to that memory. Here's a key to that unforgiveness. Here's a key. Open the door. Here's a key. Open the door. And in all the process of him doing that, what was he doing? Giving that person clearer, greater, easier access to the Father and to the kingdom. God sent me to free those who have been treated unfairly, the oppressed, and to announce, proclaim the time, year, when the Lord will show his kindness, favor. Jesus closed the book, rolled up the scroll, gave it back to the assistant, the synagogue attendant, and sat down. Everyone, all the eyes in the synagogue was watching Jesus closely. He began to say to them, while you've heard these words just now, they were coming true. Today, the scripture has been fulfilled in your ears. So what was he saying? My job is to bring, to announce, to proclaim freedom to the captives. To set free those that have been oppressed, those that have been bound. How am I going to do that? Here's a key. I give you the authority to use a key. And whatever you say, whatever key you open on the earth, we're going to make sure it stays open in heaven. Whatever key you close on the earth, I'm going to make sure it stays closed in heaven. Are you using your keys? I could argue that each time he used a key to open a lock by using his mouth, he was doing this very thing. Each time he set somebody free by using his mouth, what was he doing? I think he was using a key. I think he was sticking a key in a lock and setting somebody free, giving them access to God, giving them, removing an obstacle, removing a door, removing a barrier between them and God. We're supposed to be doing the same thing. How about we open our mouths and start changing the status of the doors in our lives and in the lives around us? How about we start using our keys? How about we start binding? How about we start loosing? How about we start creating access for us and for other people to get to God easier? To get to God without all the junk, all the drama, all the hoops that we've had to dance through. That some of us have had to dance through. Some of us continue to dance through. Keys of the kingdom.